we're going to get started with the fertilizer transportation panel. I just came back 2 weeks ago. Michelle and I went down to Austin. Simplot family had me down speak for their whole group. It was an awesome conference. It was down in Austin, like I said. Some great information. I walked away with several things that I took away and used. So I'm going to kick things off with Richard. Richard Sunderland's their VP of supply chain at Simplot, and Richard gave me some good insight on pricing fertilizer and pricing a few things, trying to just piggyback a little bit off them. And so, as you folks know, I like to have the conference where you can walk away with some things you can actually use, not just hear a bunch of views from 30,000 feet. So how you can maybe help price things, how you can help price fertilizer inputs. Richard, kick us off and tell us what you're seeing.
Hello, Kevin, and thanks very much for the opportunity. Good to be with you all today. First question on your minds is, where is the heck is that accent from? And it's from the UK. And as I found out once in Louisville on a trip there, the UK does not mean the University of Kentucky. It is, in fact, the United Kingdom. So I just want to clarify that. So I've been in the States 25 years. I'm an Anglo-American, and I'm based in Boise at the moment, and I'm loving it. I look project for the next 4 to 6 months as to where we've been. And obviously a lot of discussion earlier today was about the Russia-Ukraine conflict that's kicked off February of last year. And really, how did that impact the world of fertilizer, and why which was obviously being tied up with the Russians in terms of association and restrictions, is one of the top 3 exporters of potash in the world, next to the Russians and the Canadians. And then the Ukraine itself and the Baltic ports are large exporters, or were large exporters of fertilizer, particularly ammonia, where nearly 2 million tons of ammonia was exported. So, you know, when the conflict kicked off, you rapidly got an increase in natural gas prices with the Nord Stream 1, the Nord Stream 2 issue, and the lack of supply to Europe. And what that did initially was very, very quickly see a rapid curtailment of EU nitrogen production. And just to put it into context, the EU produces about 20 million tons of ammonium nitrate and calcium ammonium nitrate, 10 million tons of urea, and about 7 million tons of UAN. So 35 to 40 million tons of production. At one point, 65% of that production was curtailed. So obviously a rapid applying of the brakes. At a time also when China was knowingly restricting exports in order to have plentiful supplies of affordable fertilizer for its own domestic use, and took really 6 million tons of phosphate off the export market and 3 million tons of urea off the market. So you had that situation. And in terms of Belarus, that amounted to the fact that what happened is 95% of their exports ended up going through Klaipėda in Lithuania. And the Lithuanians said, you ain't coming through here. And they had nowhere to go, and still haven't quite solved that problem, and therefore are running at 6 million tons less supply. So all of that was tremendously disconcerting to the buying community. And so therefore you had the European buyers, the North American buyers, and the Brazilian buyers all pretty much step in simultaneously to get some fertilizer, because they went to themselves, where's it going to come from, and I need it. So you had a humongous buying spree between February and June of last year, and that propelled prices up to 2008-9 type of levels. So once you got to that point, and when we get to the summer, and by the way, in that process, you saw some unusual things. So, for example, you saw 1 million tons of UAN shipped from the US to France. You saw 750,000 tons of US urea shipped to Europe as well. Those are unusual. I'll get to that point later. So, you know, Europe by summertime was satisfied. It had its armada on its way. The Brazilians had their armada on its way. And frankly, we had a very disappointing spring season last year. I mean, people had high expectations, and then it was a bit of a non-event, frankly, having had a very good fall. So all that meant is that South America was pretty full, Europe had its armada on its way, and North America had some carryover. So you had a situation really coming out of summer where there was a dearth of buying. And hence the reason that we've seen prices decline pretty precipitously over the last 4 to 6 months. And you've had prices on NPK drop anywhere from 30 to 50%. So that's kind of where we're at the end of the year. When I met Kevin in Austin, I was trying to present the case to say, what's the case for stable to firming fertilizer prices? And this is kind of where my bent is. Well, firstly, it's a lot more affordable than it was, being 30 to 50% lower. I think the situation in Brazil has cleared itself up. It's never been one of farmer economics, but more been or demand. It's more been a situation of over procurement and buying too much too quickly. And that situation has now sorted itself out. And Brazil is now actually back in the market as a buyer of N, P, and K, which we haven't seen actually of any significance for about 3 to 4 months. The other situation is that, fall here was okay, but it wasn't spectacular like last year. And I think the prospects, with the consensus being 92, perhaps as high as 93 million acres of corn, with the situation of being that most buying is behind pace in North America. I mean, we've had very much a focus at the retail level on destocking, a big focus like everybody has had in terms of cash flow consideration. So the buying pace is behindhand. We're going to have more corn acres. The question is how many. I think the prospects are for a good, and if moisture allows, a potentially great spring season. You have Brazil back buying, India as a constant buyer, Europe needing to buy. So you're going to have 4 geographies in the market simultaneously buying NPK. So I think that's the case to say, firstly, that fertilizer represents pretty good value at the moment across the board, having come down 30 to 50% relative to commodity prices and farmer economics. But you've also got to think to yourself is, if we get these 3 or 4 geographies, as I expect, back buying in the next 4 to 6 weeks, at a minimum, that should keep prices stable to going higher. So my feeling is that stable to higher prices in the next 4 to 6 weeks is a higher probability than not. And the market has worked its way down, and we're in affordability zone, and fertilizer provides decent value. In terms of my look-fors for the future, going into 23, I think obviously the EU natural gas situation and the nitrogen industry in Europe is a huge question mark. And it's obviously hugely volatile. When Kevin and I met 6 weeks ago, gas in Europe was $45. Today it's $23 for 15 months. So that's in 6 weeks. If you've got a ski vacation book for the Alps, you might want to rethink that because it's been so mild there. But, though that's a very changeable situation, and, maybe if we get Arctic blasts, we go back to 40 and 60 and higher. Obviously, if you're a nitrogen producer in Europe, it's a very precarious position that you're in. That compares itself to a North American producer who's enjoying gas at $4 to $5 an MMBTU. So there's really today at least a 6-fold price premium. And watching that and what happens to EU nitrogen production rates is going to be important. The Chinese export policy could change quickly. There aren't rumors or feelings that it will. But if you add 5-6 million tons of phosphate on the market, that's going to have an impact pretty quickly. We don't think it's going to happen, but it could do. Commodity prices on the demand side, clearly key to affordability. One of the things that I thought about today that doesn't get often talked about is if the market has cut back in terms of application rates by as much as 30%, and bear in mind some of that's on a simple fact that if I don't have the money, I only have a certain amount of money to spend on crop nutrition, and if that buys less tons, so be it. People don't often talk about what is the yield effect of that worldwide cutback. Now, I know many farmers, mine soils and are very judicious, but it is a question mark in my mind that's not often answered, is what is the yield impact of all this decline in terms of fertilizer usage that there's been in the last 6 months. Weather, clearly very important. Good news is that, we have a big business in California. Snowpack looks good so far. Last year, obviously, it was a very bad situation. Crops such as rice were almost decimated by lack of water. So weather situation and moisture, or too much moisture is clearly it. And obviously geopolitics, it seems to me that every day that I click on the BBC, there's something that's happened in the world that's affecting the world of fertilizer that we need to be astute and move fast towards. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about. As I say, I think overall, as we sit here in early January in 23, fertilizer represents good value, I think. Buyers have procrastinated, do need to come back. The supply chain in North America is behind pace. Exports, particularly of nitrogen, were higher than last year, so we need to be competitive relative to Brazil and relative to other markets to get our share of imports. And that needs to happen now in January, because fertilizer is going to start to go to the ground before we know it. So that's my kind of brief recap, Kevin.
Perfect. If you guys are like me in the trading world, I would always get hooked in a little bit by the guys pitching the market to me that had a British accent. Give them about 5 points higher on an IQ from the British accent, It's like girls from down south, just a little cuter, right? You know what I'm saying. So it's and I like listening to Richard talk. And I'm always like, man, that guy is on it.
Bamboozle Kevin. I'm sorry about that.
No, heck no, that's perfect. I loved going down and hearing your talk down in Austin. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about global supply chain. Jay O'Neill, you want to kind of give us your 30,000-foot view of what's happening here on the global supply chain side of things?
Yes, that's coming through okay now?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Kevin. I'm going to give you a little different perspective. I'm going to tell you, in essence, from my perspective, when we talk about ocean freight and transportation issues, that it really boils down to one thing, and that's China. It's China, China, and China. So though the Black Sea is important and what's happening there is very significant, in the world of ocean freight transportation, it's pretty much about China. And the reason for that is because we have to break ocean freight down into at least three sectors. Dry bulk, which is going to take the grain and the fertilizer and the chemicals and the iron ore and coal shipments around the world. And then, of course, we have the tanker fleets that are going to take the liquid type of material, cargo from point to point. And then we have the containerized shipping industry, which is going to take mostly consumer products mostly from Asia to the U.S. and to Europe. So if we look at those three sectors quickly, and the most important to this group is going to be dry bulk, we have to understand something, and that is dry bulk. In the dry bulk world, take the entire dry bulk fleet that exists, and 52% of that carries iron ore and coal. Grain, in dry bulk terms, constitutes, and it varies by a percentage up and down year to year, but currently it's about 12% of the cargo carrying demand in the dry bulk sector. So we think of grain as being important because it's very, very significant to all of us, but to the ocean freight world, grain doesn't drive the bus. It's coal and iron ore. And 60% of all the coal and iron ore carried in the world goes to China. So as goes China, as their demand ebbs and flows, so goes the dry bulk freight market, because Capesize, those large vessels that can't fit through the Panama Canal and have to go all the way around the Cape, they constitute the majority of business in dry bulk. So the Capesize sector, iron ore and coal, so to speak, drives the bus. The Panamax, Handymax, Supramax, those other vessels that tend to be anywhere from a Panamax is going to be 85,000 tons down to about 55,000 tons of cargo. About, if you're down in the 55,000 ton category, you're just over 2 million bushels per vessel. And then down to those sizes that are 35, 45, 55 in size. So we in the dry bulk market, we tend to follow what's happening in the Capesize and in that iron ore sector. And again, China is the big leader in that. It's a little scary when you think about what was presented earlier today. If China is falling apart a little bit, if China economy should diminish instead of grow, freight demand in the grand scheme of things is going to diminish. Now, right now, dry bulk ocean freight owners, and they've been doing this for the last year, have been hoping and praying that this would be their time, that they suffered all the way going from 2000 to 2006, 2007. We had that very, very large spike straight up in the air after the Beijing Olympics, or right prior to the Beijing Olympics, that took ocean freight from $10,000, $12,000 a day, because a ship doesn't care about the rate; he cares about how much am I earning per day, and that jumped up to 45, 50, 60,000 a day and more in 2007. And then we had the crash that came after 2008, and we've gone through 13 years of, they bounce around, but no big excitement in the world of dry bulk ocean freight. So coming into last year, ocean freight owners are saying, my gosh, cargo demand should increase faster than fleet growth. Fleet growth of the world dry bulk fleet is estimated to increase by about 2.3, 2.4% increase in the number of ships available in the global fleet. Cargo growth has been projected to grow by about 3%. Providing China continues to increase their purchases. But with that economic slowdown that's occurring in China, that's not happening. So we don't see that rally occurring in dry bulk freight. And dry bulk freight owners are back to earning $12,000, $15,000 a day for their ship, and dreaming and hoping of the day when they'll get $40,000, $45,000 a day, 3 times as much for their ship, once this economic recovery occurs in China, and hopefully, in their eyes, in the rest of the world. So every ocean freight owner out there is bullish. Every ocean freight owner is going to tell you, hey, the market has to go up. Plus, my cost is increasing. We all know that fuel has increased, and we also know that the worldwide community is putting more restrictions on the ocean freight industry as far as pollution is concerned. So in 2020, the dry bulk fleet, actually the entire fleet, tankers, dry bulk, everybody, was required to reduce their CO2 emissions from 3% down to 0.5%. Now, there's 3 ways you can do that. You can move from high sulfur fuel, which has been the predominant fuel utilized in ship engines. It's called bunker fuel, and it's the sludge that's left over at the end of the refining process. That's high sulfur fuel that they're accustomed to burning. You can switch to very low sulfur fuel. But that's a lot more expensive. It ranges between $200, $300, even sometimes $400 a ton premium in price. At the moment, it's closer to about $300 a ton for very low sulfur fuel. But that's expensive. You can install scrubbers on your ships, just like you might do on a smokestack, an industrial smokestack. It's kind of like a car wash for smokestack. Puts water in, and you can have a closed loop or an open loop scrubber that cleans the exhaust, and that puts you back into compliance. Or you can go to something called slow steaming, because if you drive your car more slowly, you get better gas mileage. So we've seen ship speeds drop from about 14 knots down to 11, 12 knots, sometimes 10 knots, to try to be in compliance with the new laws. Now, this year we have something new. The United Nations, under the new compliance regulations, this year, ships of all descriptions are going to be judged by their emissions this year. And at the end of this year, 2023, they will be assigned a number, a letter, A, B, C, D, and E. A being A-rated, and those lower numbers being not so good rated. And that's going to add, they're going to have to slow down, use compliant fuel, or switch to methane, LNG, or other types of fuel in their ships. So all that is taking place in dry bulk right now, and giving dry bulk vessel owners the opinion that freight can only go up. Again, I'm not convinced that that's going to happen. I think that the Chinese economy is not going to recover so quickly, is not going to come out of their COVID restrictions rapidly, as the vessel owners are hoping, and that we'll probably see a rather dull ocean freight market as we go into 2003, let alone if we should go into a global recession. That would obviously be even more bearish. Tanker fleets. Tanker fleets are under the same environmental restrictions. I want to clarify, though, a couple points regarding the Black Sea and Russian oil. I have, from an ocean freight standpoint, I guess I have a different view or different opinion of things. One, Russian wheat is not sanctioned. So it is allowed to trade freely in the market anywhere it wants to go. So in my opinion, I don't see that the world is losing access to Russian wheat. It's going to trade. Russian crude oil, up until now, or actually here in January, there are sanctions put on Russian crude, but at the moment, those sanctions are only on crude, not on refined products. So Russian refined products can get insurance, jet fuel, gasoline, other types of distillates can trade freely. February 5, there will be further restrictions on refined products coming out of Russia. But when we talk about Russians cannot get insurance for their oil, that's both true and false at the same time. One, as you'll read in the newspapers, and it kind of reminds me of a Mark Twain quote that said, "Those who do not read the newspaper are uninformed. Those who do read the newspaper are ill-informed." And I think that's what we're seeing in media quite a bit, quite frankly. Insurance companies have dropped off and will not offer insurance for Russian crude oil. Well, that's true, but not everybody has dropped off. Swiss Re, Hanover Re still offer insurance on vessels, reinsurance on vessels. We have three types of fleets out there today in crude oil. We have the regular fleet, the regular world fleet. We have the dark fleet. What's the dark fleet? That's those ships who turn off their transponders and don't let you see where they are or who they are. And they're circling around out there all over the place. That's been going on ever since the Iran restrictions on their crude oil. We've had an active dark fleet. And recently we have what we call the shadow fleet. Russia has purchased 200 tankers under their own flag. And they don't transpond. They don't let you know where they're loading or where they're unloading. So Russian crude is, aside from what is shipping to India and getting re-documented, or might be shipping to the Middle East or someplace else and getting re-documented, what's shipping to Bulgaria and being refined by Russian oil companies, it's still flowing. And the old grain trader in me says it probably will continue to flow, albeit with problems, with restrictions, not as easily as it flowed before, but it's going to flow. And then lastly, just containerized, because we ship about 1% of our grain, specialty food-grade soybeans, DDGs, some soybean meal, and other products that we ship internationally in containers that go out in 20 to 25-ton increments in a container. And very shortly, very short answer to that one, in my opinion, is we had a huge spike. As you probably know, over the last 2 years through COVID, we had rates from from Asia to the west coast of the United States at just under $2,000 a container, a TEU. And that spiked up over 20, 25, 30,000. There were even reports of $40,000 per unit being paid to get consumer products to the States. We had backups in LA Long Beach that were 45 days. Traditional wait, 1 to 0 days. Now we're back to about a 1-day wait at LA Long Beach. So we've resolved some of that, and consumer products are flowing, and we have a little bit better availability to ship U.S. specialty grains back to Asia and other places. So bottom line for me is I'm still bearish on freight. We're low, so I don't see us going a lot lower, but whether it's grain or whether it's fertilizer, I see it as still moving, but not in the way ocean freight vessel owners would like to see it flow. One last thing, I had a question at lunch before I came up here. Somebody said, well, is Brazil going to run out of fertilizer for their safina crop? My estimate of that is absolutely not. Brazil is importing, as you may have heard earlier, they've been buying large amounts of fertilizer. The ports are getting a little less congested, but vessel people I've talked to had as much as 6-week wait times. The lineup in Brazil to unload a fertilizer vessel just a short time ago was up to 6 weeks. It's now abating, but Brazil's getting fertilizer they need for their crops, at least for the time being. That's my quick analysis. If somebody wants to know what is that cost for insurance for these Russian vessels coming out with the, it was about 0.5% for hull insurance before the war broke out. It went up to 1.5%. So we're probably up right now to just over $350,000 for 1 week's worth of insurance on a vessel coming out of Ukraine or Russia, where they can get that insurance. So it's expensive, but so far they're getting it. And thank you for the time.
No, Jay, that great update on the ocean freight side. Tom, update us. Tell us where we're at on the rails.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my goodness, Tom.
Good morning.
Smith.
Is this on?
Yeah, you may have to pull it closer.
Can you hear me okay? I've been in this business a long time. I was listening to Mr. Mock up here earlier telling us how old he was and how long he's been in the business. Well, he's just a kid. I was driving 18-wheelers when he was still in diapers. So I got my commercial operator's license. I was a farm boy. Got my license when I was 14. Started driving trucks and worked my way through high school and college for a truck line. Majored in transportation, if you can believe that. Not very many people even knew it was a major. But I majored in transportation at Texas Tech and then went on to other grad schools in transportation, wound up at the New York Academy of Advanced Traffic, learned all that stuff to practice before the Interstate Commerce Commission, just before the Staggers Act came in. So everything I learned was not worth anything because the Interstate Commerce Act was changed with Staggers Act and when the railroads were deregulated. But I've been in the business so long that I remember all the acronyms of all the stuff that we used to talk about. There were 37 Class 1 railroads when I got my first big job in transportation, which was Anaconda Company in New York City. Anaconda was the largest shipper by volume in the U.S. because we moved all the ores, all the concentrates, all the wire and cable, all the brass, all the aluminum, and all the copper ingots. We moved so many different products, but we were the largest shipper by volume. So I had the opportunity at a very young age to start dealing with railroads. And very quick to learn how dysfunctional an industry can be. They have improved somewhat, but they were never part of the just-in-time transportation. You know, I did a bunch of work for Purdue Farms at one point in my career, and we had windows of when we could deliver product to companies like Walmart. You had a 15-minute window of when your truck could arrive, and you had 30 minutes to unload, and then you had to be out of the bay. Railroads, I mean, 15 days maybe, but 15 minutes? But the last 2 years during COVID and up till right now have been the most frustrating years of my career. I mean, I dealt with mergers and when the UP and the SP went together and they didn't know how to do anything and they had different systems and service went to heck everywhere. But But the railroads lost their way during COVID. They had just begun to implement what we call precision scheduling railroad. Okay, so what they were going to do is to eliminate hump yards, eliminate a lot of their personnel, and instead block trains closer to the origin and take them as far as they can to a general destination before they broke them up, instead of running them through a hump yard every 250 miles or so. And a hump yard is just a hump. Okay, the cars are pushed up over a hump, gravity fed down to 8 or 10 tracks, and somebody in a control tower says, oh, that one's going on track 2 and that one's going on track 6, and they designate it and switch them, and they roll down the hill and bang into each other and damage the commodities that are in there if they're fragile. And then they moves on to destination and goes through another hump yard or 2 before it gets there. And when it gets to the destination, if you're shipping bagged corn flour, you can rest assured, well, most of it's not going to be bagged anymore. So it's been an interesting career to try to deal, I mean, with all this experience. You'd think that I'd have, and I have great contacts with the railroads, you'd think we'd be able to solve these problems. But the fact is, the railroads couldn't solve them themselves. You get the right guy on the phone. I mean, it might be an AVP of operations. I can't fix it. I mean, we're just in this meltdown. So what they did when they went to precision scheduled railroading, and it allowed them to reduce the number of employees they had somewhere between 10 and 15%. When you're dealing with unions and you start reducing employees, you offer them a buyout, and your senior personnel leave. And then the bidding process takes place, because the senior union people have the best jobs. So once they have been bought out and are off the property, the middle seniority people want those jobs. So they start bidding into these other jobs. And then the lower level people start bidding into their jobs. So you have this complete shuffling of personnel. So the person that knew how to switch the plant in Peculiar, Missouri, that was on the Missouri Pacific back when, and now part of the UP, that knew everything about that plant and the plant personnel, he retired and went somewhere else. Now the guy that's got to switch that plant doesn't know what he's doing. So it takes him about twice as much time to switch the plant as it did the original crews. So this shuffled throughout the industry, and they eliminated their hump yards, and they sold their locomotives. Service just melted down. And it particularly melted down on what I call, I mean, everybody says, first mile, last mile. With a railroad, it's first 50 miles and last 50 miles, right? Because it's getting to that first terminal. They really melted down. I mean, and service, days of service by a railroad, you get 7-day service. That means you get served every day. Or you get 6-day service or 5-day service. Well, not anymore. Most of the time now it's what they call tri-weekly service. Now they spell it T-R-I, weekly. I spell it T-R-Y, W-E-A-K-L-E-Y, because they really don't do a very good job here, guys. I mean, they're trying, but they're not trying very hard. So we're in a situation right now where railroads are trying to hire new employees. And by the way, Johnson County, you may not know this either, Kevin. Johnson County Community College out here in Oberlin Park is the only place that a junior college teaches railroading. They have track maintenance. If you go out behind the college, got that big track out there, maintenance way. They teach maintenance way. They have locomotive simulators. They teach people to run a locomotive. If you go out there, and by the way, if any of you are running grain operations and are trying to run shuttle trains in and out of your operation, the railroad will leave their power with that train, provided that your employees have certification. Johnson County is about the only place in the country that will certify your employees to operate railroad locomotives. So you can hire them to come to your site and train your people to operate their locomotives. So, but it's a tiny little community college out here, and the railroads need to hire about 10,000 employees, and a lot of them are to be engineers. So it's not going to happen quickly, but it is beginning to show. So, my wife's in the audience today, and one of our other associates, and before I came up here, we run about 2,500 rail cars that we track every day. My wife's name is Terry, her associate's name is Terry, so the Terry team tracks these cars every day, and I ask them, well, how is service today? And one of them says, it sucks, and the other one says, it's super. So it's one of the S's, I'm not too sure, but I would go with the suck side. So when all of this started manifesting itself about 90 days ago, a lot of rail shippers and rail shipper associations filed complaints with the Surface Transportation Board. Today, the regulatory agency that handles, it's in the Department of Transportation Board, or Department of Transportation, but the Surface Transportation Board is the federal regulatory agency that regulates railroads. So they started getting a lot of complaints about rail service. I mean, not single car service, but all rail service. And a lot of your really big companies file complaints. The STB held hearings over about a 60-day period. And they came out with some new orders. Number one, they told all the railroads they had to present a recovery plan, which all of them have been presented. And it's like you'd expect, it's political speak, so it's we're going to do this and we're going to do that, but in reality, not a lot has happened. I think it's improved some, but not a lot. But the one thing that they did is they required all of the railroads to provide new performance metrics for the first 50 miles and the last 50 miles. We've always gotten dwell time in yards and train speeds and all of those things, but we've never really gotten a metric that tells us how they're performing and getting railroad customers switched where you really need rail service. Now they're having to provide that, and they're having to provide an overall performance measure of that. What percentage of the time are they meeting their own standards? On shuttle trains, believe it or not, they're up above 75% now. Pretty good. I mean, for a railroad, 75%, that's awesome. On the first 50 miles, last 50 miles, they're still in the 30s. So they got a long way to go to restore service. So we were negotiating some contracts recently. We represent about 15 companies, probably 35 or 40 plants, and we negotiate all their rail rates and all of their service agreements and all of their car leases. So we were meeting with one of the 7 Class 1s that are left. There were 37 when I got in the business. We're down to 7 now. Meeting with one of those Class 1s, and we were negotiating a 2-year contract. And we have always seen rate increases anywhere from, sometimes we get 2%, maybe 3%. I think one time I saw them ask for 5%. We didn't wind up getting it. The first thing they told us is those days are over. There's no 2 or 3 or 4% anymore. Our economics are such. What they're saying is our shareholders are upset, but our economics are such that we want a 7 to 9% increase, and 9% is going to be what we're requesting. A 9% increase in your rail rates? I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I've been in the business longer than anybody in that room. In fact, if you had 2 or 3 of them, put them together, I've been in the business longer than they've been alive. But I've never seen anything like that. So it's a unique situation we're in. The railroads retain the purchasing power and the pricing power. They are an oligopoly. We don't have a lot of options. You can't truck, 110 car trains, and now we're going to 110 car ethanol trains too. We've been at 90 or 100, now we're going to 110, and they're talking about going to 120. There's no way you can truck the volumes of the commodities, beans and corn and wheat and ethanol and petroleum out of the Balkan. It's still moving a lot of rail. Just not going to happen. So they have pricing power, and they're using it right now. They've become very accustomed to being able to dictate rail rates. It's not a negotiation, although we did get them to come down a little bit. It is a very difficult situation that shippers find themselves in. But in summary, you know, I have a drink every afternoon. Now, dealing with the railroads, I should have 3 or 4, but I try to just limit to 1, okay? So I try to remember, it doesn't matter whether my glass is half full and half empty dealing with the railroads, there's still room for booze. Thank you, Kevin.
No, I hear you. So, Tom, do you think there could be some areas of the country that end up short supply fertilizer just because the rails are going to be backed up and the traffic's going to be a little tricky?
It depends on whether it's moving in single cars or whether it's moving in trains. You know, I think the trains are going to move pretty well. I don't think there's a shortage of rail equipment. It's just a service issue.
Right.
So if I were in the fertilizer business, I would move early and start shipping today. There's no doubt about the fact that service failures are going to happen. They're happening to our clients every day. Although I will say we are filing less shutdown logs since maybe December 15th than we were before. Shutdown log is something you file with a railroad that says your plant's going to shut down if we don't get service. And that goes to management. Every one of those shutdown logs has to be addressed by somebody in management. I don't think we've filed one in the last 2 weeks, and that's really unusual because we were filing 1 or 2 a day.
Now, Kellen, Kellen runs the barge freight over at Zeno. What are you seeing on the barge side?
Yeah, I'll quickly kind of go through what impacts barge freight here and just kind of see where that's taken us over the last couple of years and what's moving forward. You know, the biggest impacts that go into barge freight, you know, it's pretty easy to see the seasonality. You know, harvest pressure is one of the biggest drivers and where that market's going during that 6-month time period of when soybeans are being pushed, you know, from origin to destination, and we see demand being strong. We're kind of coming out of that right now. We're going into more of a corn-focused export program with less pull, so it's causing barge freight to break, as we see here. You know, the biggest impacts, you know, fuel prices we've seen over the last couple of years. You know, as it goes up, it creates a floor that's rising. It's not necessarily going to be the biggest driver constantly, but it's going to keep the floor whenever we are trading on break evens for barge lines. So that floor has risen. And you know, another reason that floor has risen over the last couple of years is the labor. The barge industry is going through the same issues that the rail industry is going through. You know, it's just hard to find good people, and you know, it's not necessarily just on the boats. It's on the fleets, and the cost of fleeting is going up and just causing overall costs to rise to create the floor. You know, being higher. We've seen you know, the barge fleet size over the last couple of years, as well as it was getting bigger for so long with the tax breaks that were in place, and then that ended, and we've seen the fleet now go from somewhere from probably, you know, I would say the industry didn't have an exact number, but somewhere around 13,000, and you know, it hasn't dropped drastically, but it's gone lower here as the fleet is getting older, and we're seeing barges get retired. We're seeing barges move from covered hoppers to open hoppers. There is, you know, covered hoppers built every year, but it's just not enough to keep up with the retirement of barges, and you know, it's causing that supply in the market to just shrink and causing prices to go higher. You know, the biggest impact, I guess quickly, demand, you know, is obviously going to be the big driver, and if we had good exports, or if we're having you know, a year like this where exports aren't going to be phenomenal, and we'll see values most likely over, the next 6 months until we get to harvest trade close to break evens. And we'll see barge lines just do everything they possibly can to keep those above and not have to tie up the fleet. And, one thing, the biggest thing that's impacted barge freight over the last 2 years has just been river logistics. So we've seen, Hurricane Ida was a big impact with the fleet getting balled up in New Orleans, and we saw all the barges get stuck for 30 days and unable to get out of the Gulf and get back up to origin whenever harvest was going on. So it caused freight values to go from I would say a normal freight harvest level, say, is somewhere between if the market trades between 400 to 800% tariff, that's a big volatility year. And that year we went up to over 1,000 and got close to all-time highs. And then this past year we saw the low water impacts were drastic, and we saw low water from pretty much everywhere, St. Louis and south, and you went from loading a barge with 70 to 80,000 bushels, and you were loading 50 to 55,000 bushels. So your supply was much lower at that time, causing freight to go extremely higher, and we traded, up over 2,000 to 2,500% of tariff. So caused values to just drastically go higher. And I would say that's the biggest thing that I see moving forward is the volatility. We're going to we've taken the floor up just based off of labor and fuel prices, and that feels like it's going to be stable. But then the volatility that we see with the seasonality, it seems like we're in this for a while until we can find a way to rebuild the fleet and get more supply. A barge 5 years ago cost $500,000 to make, and now it's around $900,000. So the cost is going higher. The ability to retire a barge 5 years ago, you would get $20,000 for that barge, and you're getting now around $80,000. So the incentive is higher to do that as well. So those are the big impacts that are causing barge freight to be very volatile. I think that as we move forward, that's going to be the biggest struggle is just having to trade that volatility, and has a lot of opportunity with it as well.
Perfect. We've got a few ag retailers here to get their perspective a little bit. Mitch, let's open it up with you guys over at Meristem. I know you guys have seen some really great growth here in the last year and last 2 years. And, what do you guys attribute it to? What are you seeing? What are you seeing for the future? And you've got a farm yourself, and I know Grant Farms, so I'm sure you guys are going to have some good, bold opinions. And what do you think on the space?
Well, Meristem, if you've not heard of us, Meristem Crop Performance, we just finished our fourth cropping season. The first time we had Meristem branded products in the ground was 2019. We just finished 2022, and thanks to a lot of people in this room and the good Lord, we paid off all of our debt before the 31st. So last week, my New Year's gift and Christmas present was Meristem is debt-free. So as a startup disruptor to achieve profitability and pay off our creditors within 4 years, it's a pretty good feeling. Our strategy was really simple. It was, how do we grow more bushels with less? And it's not that hard to do. You just got to change the way you're doing things. You got to think about it different. You got to think, we're spending all this time talking about the supply chain. Don't be a victim of the supply chain. Take a hold of the supply chain and you be the driver. Don't be the victim. And I can talk about products we have that'll reverse that for you. So our purpose is to grow more bushels with less. How can we get more bushels in your hopper with less input and less cash? That's what we do. How do we do it? We do it through a two-pronged strategy. One is we had first addressed the traditional supply chain for agricultural products. It's overbuilt. The infrastructure servicing your farms today is much more than you need. You might not realize it, but the farmers in this room today own more infrastructure to put on fertilizer and crop protection products than all of ag retail combined. Now, if you were farming 20 years ago, that kind of a statement would have been considered nonsense, right? Well, now you've got more infrastructure than the channel. If you've got more infrastructure on the channel, then you probably don't need all the support you used to have. So what we do is we've moved from a traditional 3-step distribution channel to 1-step. And when you take 2 steps out of the supply chain, it's pretty easy to get you guys products for 30 to 40% less than you're paying today. So that's one. Number 2 was biologicals. This is a fertilizer discussion. Kevin, when you first invited me on to talk about fertilizer, what in the world's he doing? Meristem doesn't sell commodity NP and K. But what we do is sell products that allow you to grow more bushels with less N, P, and K. Those of you with using manure today, you've had a great run. Your neighbors are choking over the cost of fertilizer, and you're spreading manure, and you've dodged the bullet. Well, guess what? You're using biologicals. The biologicals that come out of that manure are doing the same thing as the synthetics. Well, if you take those biologicals and you put them into the ground, guess what? You're not going to eliminate the need for fertilizer. But what you can do, we talked about mining fertilizer. A gentleman from Simplot spoke of mining fertilizer. There's a lot of fertilizer out there to mine. There's enough fertilizer in most of your fields now that from a dry standpoint, you could easily make tremendous reductions in P and K and zinc and manganese and iron if you just went to biological substitutes. Because biologicals like manure, all they are the same things already in your ground. So when you say, well, man, it takes 100 years to move phosphorus an inch in the soil profile. Well, what's moving it? There's little microbes in your soil biology that move fertilizer from being unavailable to available. How many people in here today put zinc in furrow on their corn? Now, unless there's no farmers in the room, I know that's not true. How many farmers use zinc in furrow on their corn? Thank you very much. Most of you do. Well, that little kernel of seed corn you plant every year, it's got zinc in it. That white tip at the bottom of the kernel of corn, that's zinc. So God already put the zinc in there to drive the germination and the root development. But what do? You go out there and you put more zinc on. And when you put on more zinc, you get better emergence and you get better root systems, right? Biologicals are no different than that. If you go out and you put the biologicals on the ground that are currently in the ground moving P and K, from being unavailable to available, it's the same as putting more zinc on your seed corn. When you put higher levels of this biology out there, you're not putting something foreign in the soil. The way your fertilizer is moving from being unavailable to available today, soil biology delivered by microbes. If you isolate the microbes that are causing the fertilizer to move from unavailable to available, now you're releasing lots of nutrition that's already in the field that you're waiting on Mother Time to convert. When you put biologicals out there, what you do is you speed Mother Time up. Now, instead of taking years to go from unavailable to available, now we're talking months, which will allow you to use less fertilizer. So there's an example of where we've taken biology and we've reduced the cost of fertilizer. These products work if you keep them alive. Delivery systems are everything. If you've not taken a look at these biologicals, please look at them. It would have been like not looking at atrazine in 1950. You've got to look at these products. They're going to take cost out of your fertilizer. Now, where you go to look for them is probably not the same channel you buy your chemicals and fertilizer. How many people in here right now, if I told you a new enzyme's been developed and we're no longer going to need corn to make ethanol? And as a result, corn's going back to $2.53. How many people in this room feel good about that? Now no hands come up because all of you want to puke at this very moment, at the mere thought of it. Well, if you're in the business of selling chemicals and industrial fertilizer, biologicals is like wiping out the ethanol demand and moving corn back to 250 or 3 bushel. Don't look for somebody making money on a segment to go broke to help you out with a new innovation. That's the reason we built a new channel at Meristem. Our channel is built out of local entrepreneurs. We don't really do the national play. We work with local entrepreneurs to deliver products and service to the farm gate. It's not the traditional way you buy it. So our partners don't look like your traditional supplier, but our partners are motivated to help you grow more bushels, and they're highly motivated to take cost out of your business. I think the reason that we're 4 years in and we're debt-free and making money is because that's what we do. We'll help you grow more bushels with less. So in this fertilizer arena, one of the things that's really driven the success of Meristem has been the high price of fertilizer. As farmers look to whittle down that fertilizer spend, traditionally they've gone to manure. Now you've got another option outside of manure, and it's called biologicals. In the future, you will know biological microbe names like you know chemical names. You've all heard of atrazine, 2,4-D, glyphosate, glufosinate. We could go on all day long. In 10 years, you'll be able to cite off microbes just like you can cite off active molecules. Because you don't create microbes. God created all the microbes that are out there. So once you learn what that microbe is, it's a commodity. And they're very cost effective. If you keep them alive, they work. It's a tremendous opportunity for everybody in this room to grow bushels with less. And that's the process we use. The payoff is the products we have. We've got products that release nutrition through your residue on your ground, through your unavailable fertilizer in the soil, and we've got microbes that fixate atmospheric nitrogen. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah, what's the biggest change you've made on your farm, you particularly?
Well, it would be weed control has been the big change on my personal farm. Is we've found that with the use of biologies, you don't kill any weeds, you don't kill any bugs, but your need for use of synthetics drops tremendously. I didn't have a weed in my soybeans last year, and the only thing I used was Liberty, 2,4-D, and a product called Excavator from Meristem. I no-tilled my beans. I never had a weed come up all year long. Did we kill any weeds? No, we didn't kill one weed. These products don't kill weeds. But what they will do is they'll eat everything out on top of the ground and convert it back into available fertilizer through the form of carbon. But when you convert all of that, what we call insect and disease and weed pressure today, you actually turn it back into fertilizer with a lot less synthetics than we're using today. So that's one thing I've seen this past year.
How about you, Grant? You own one of the big, fast-growing ag retailers, and you sell everything, and you also farm. So what are you seeing on your farms?
Yeah, maybe just give a 1-minute background, because just so everybody understands the perch that I sit on and how I view things. I respect my dad who's passed away. I respect my grandfather and my great-grandfather, and I respect everybody in Northwest Iowa where I grew up. And I want nothing more than to see the success of all the farmers in our area and that we work with. And so as a young guy, I'm watching my dad struggle, right? He's struggling with making financial decisions on his farm. And as I go to college, I want to do what Dad's going to do. I'm going to be a farmer. And I learned about myself in college that I'm really good at sales. I sold the Cutco cutlery door to door while playing D2 football and taking 16 credit hours. And I just absolutely loved Cutco, just sales in general. I called Dad. I said, Dad, what can I do that's sales on the farm? Because I have a passion for that. And he says, I don't know, son. And so got an internship at a local co-op to learn the back door of ag retail. So with that knowledge, I was so excited, so jacked up. I called my father and I said, I want to start an independent business on our farm. The same farm that my grandpa and great-grandpa lived on. And he said, okay, son, when you graduate, you can do that. And so unfortunately, my dad passed away right when I graduated college. But with that sheer will of wanting to be an independent, do that on my farm, I ventured out and I said, how is ag retail being done today? And how can it be done better? That was everything that I looked at. Chemicals, fertilizer, seed treatments. And if there was a sector like seed, for instance, if there's a sector where I couldn't improve it, okay, so be it. I'm not going to venture in that. I'm going to look at every sector. And as a young guy, I'm now 37, I've literally caught everything a young guy chases. The fancy boat, the Denali truck, I've caught it. It's all empty. It's all empty. So I had to find a new reason to wake up. Okay? And so that reason to wake up is challenging how we do things today. All I give a rip about is how much profitability and ROI is left in the farmer's bank account at the end of the day. That's all I care about. And that's very rewarding and fulfilling. So I wanted to at least highlight that because Wells Ag is a regional independent retailer in Northwest Iowa. Okay, great. We have dealers. Maybe some of you have heard of us. We looked at the nutritional sector. This is 2008, 9, 10. And it's filled full of a bunch of snake oil salesmen that come through my doors as Grant Wells, who's built his business on trust. Okay, I'm not going to lie. It's all about truth. And people coming through wanting me to sell their products. Okay, I have a farm. My dad passed away. It's 2,000 acres. I got a chance. I got a $100,000 life insurance policy and an opportunity to farm. It's all cash rent. But every one of them farms, right, it had to go through grants, this 3-year test before I would even look to starting to sell a nutritional. And I'm just beating my head against the table because anybody that knows me knows that I am as competitive as they come. And I'm looking at these guys in Georgia and North Carolina raising 400 and 500 bushel corn. And I'm going, why in the heck can't I do that with black dirt in Iowa? Why can't I raise 300 bushel corn on one of my farms? And so with this passion of trying to figure it out, right? Learn a lot along the way that basically there's no help out here. The universities don't have this information for you. And I had to reinvent this, okay? Well, the one key to the success that we've gotten is I've looked in the mirror and could understand what my weaknesses were. And so as this is formulating and I'm trying to figure out nutritionals for farmers because they all come down and say, Grant, what do you think? And as an ag retailer, a lot of you that maybe are, you turn into a therapist a lot of times. You understand. And as a farmer, you understand that you want to help it fix it. Okay, and so that was my pursuit is I wanted to fix it. In 2014, I heard that Monsanto, who's now Bayer, was going to invest a pile of money into biologicals. And I'm going, great, okay. And anybody at the time, Bayer's great, love them. But at the time, Monsanto, right, it's a pleasure to do business with them, right? And so I'm going, there's got to be more options. Let's look at it. Found Biodyne, okay? And they are a family-owned company, and they have isolations. They have the technology. They've been doing it since 1989. And I'm going, here's people that I can trust. All right, let's look at this because in 5 to 6 years when Monsanto, Bayer validates the biological market, I knew I was going to have 2,000 farmers sitting at my desk going, what do you think, Grant? And I had to have an educated answer. And so as we formulated this, right, in 2019, BW Fusion was created. We finally had some aha moments with Biodyne bacteria along with some of the other nutrients like boron and zinc that I was trying to figure out on my farm. And so with the sheer goal of BW Fusion we're going to identify the targets, okay? We're going to identify the products and the use rates to get us there and the timings to get us there. And then we're going to manufacture and distribute it. That's our sole goal. We don't have an exit strategy. We're just getting started. self-funded, again, because that's important so that we can stay true to what our morals and ethics are. Okay, so that's the perch that I'm sitting on here. I play in the retail space, but I also am a part owner in BW Fusion, which is, launching through this information of micronutrient and biological manufacturing and distributing. So I want to touch on a couple things. So Jay O'Neill and basically what do we learn? We learned that trucking rates are coming down. Global barge rates are coming down. But if you talk to a local trucker, any trucker in this space today, they're struggling. They're not making money, and so but there's an availability of trucks, and so supply and demand is basically forcing rates down, even though the cost of trucks, labor, and fuel haven't caught up yet. The rail industry, it's monopolized, right? So they can just dictate what they want, and that's what he just laid out. But how awesome is it? How awesome is it that the United States of America is capitalism country, right? People can launch innovations and can challenge the current supply and demand and the current suppliers. New businesses can launch, new innovations can launch. Capitalism is key, right? We got to hear about how Richard with Simplot, mining the soil, right? And nat gas being a world market. And so when I look at this, we go capitalism. That is something that is awesome, and we like that, but the domestic United States didn't have a problem with NPK supply, okay? The world had a problem. And so unfortunately, we got to see companies like CF and Coke, mainly CF, right, export nitrogen, export nat gas to help these European countries like you've been hearing about, at the detriment of the domestic U.S. farmer. That world demand propped it up, the domestic pricing for all of us U.S. farmers. And all I give a rip about is the U.S. farmer. That's all I care about, right? America first, American farmer first. Unfortunately, in a global market, that's not the way things work. And so with these high prices of NPK, right? You look at N, right? Nat gas, UAN, urea. There's ways to upgrade that. It's a global market. Russia floods urea. Okay, now we can, now there's this UAN upgrade. What do? And there's this big price imbalance. Okay, there's there. Phosphorus, unfortunately, it's monopolized for us domestic suppliers. We have companies like Simplot and Nutrien that have monopolized that market. Potash, luckily, right, we can trade with Canada, and that stuff helps us to have more competition. So capitalism is all about competition. And as a farmer, I'm a farmer, I'm a retailer, farmer first. With the high prices of NPK, right, what can we do? What can we do to combat that stuff? Knowing what we need is the key. Precision NPK application is the key going forward. Knowing how much phosphorus we really need, knowing how much nitrogen we really need. The standard university method that we've been taught, grid sample, take a part per million sample, and fertilize based off that sample. Okay, it's only about 40% of what we need to know to actually make a real decision on how much NPK sulfur we need. If anyone has never heard of Jason Schley, the owner of Next Level Ag Lab and also director of Agronomy 365, I encourage you to get to know him. Okay, cattle farmer from South Dakota. South Dakota, love them boys. They, they didn't want to fertilize a crop in the fall because they get burned up a lot, right? With wacky weather and dry weather. And so the South Dakota boys, when it rains, they're going, all right, let's go. Let's throw it down. Let's do it. Wait a minute. What do we need? That was the premise of why Next Level Ag and Agronomy 365 got started, was to help South Dakota farmers figure out what they actually need. Okay, and so as I got to meet this guy, Jason, and I'm humbled because I started BW Fusion in 2019, me and Gil, right, trying to figure out the targets. And I got to see what he had, and I'm texting Gil, and I'm going, it is done. This guy in South Dakota figured it out. And oh, by the way, he's got like 2,800 farmers he talks to and helps. and high yield guys in every state, his name is behind these people. And I'm going, holy cow. And I asked Jason, I said, man, you've got to have companies like Wilbur Ellis and Winfield and all the big ag conglomerates willing to write you a check because you are the guy that actually is unbiased and knows what the hell we need. And I said, why aren't, are you, he's going, yeah, they want to buy me. They have a blank check. I'm like, why aren't you doing it? He goes, screw that. Because the information needs to get exposed to the farmer. Okay? Now that is some ethics that we love. And I got talking to him. I'm going, well, can we be humble? Can Fusion be humble to utilize your system as a backbone for everything we do? He says, hell yeah, I like you guys. You do it the right way. Because our single goal is don't put BS in a jug, sell what works, and validate it with the proof. And so with this backbone, doors started opening for us. We talk about biology. Okay, that's a dangerous word. Very dangerous. And Mitch touched on it, right? In the next 10 years, you're going to know, just like, atrazine or sites of action of the chemical world, you're going to know what bacteria do what. And in this space right now, it's this jarbled mess of biologicals. How do you make sense of it? Here's what BW can at least tell you, is how the biodyne biology, we can tell you what that does, okay? And we can tell you what it doesn't do. And we can tell you where it works and where it won't work. We know that our biology, at minimum, can replace 20 pounds of N, 50 pounds of P, 20 pounds of K. I have personal farms where I've done 4 years of studies with 0 P applied. I've been using this bacteria since 2014. For 4 years, 0 P applied, and I've increased my average ppm by 4 ppms, okay, with 0 applied. And all I applied was the 56 different strains of biodyne bacteria. And so, potash, I reduced it. I have those numbers. Every farmer, here's the real problem. Every farmer that sits down in front of my desk for the span of me being in business for 14 years has a whole different deciding factor of how much nitrogen they need. I get the old timer that's been doing this all of his life. He says, I need 140 units total. The next young guy that wants to win, because he's aggressive, he says, I want 220 because I don't want to be short. And the real answer to who's right and wrong is they're both right and they're both wrong. In that field, you're going to have totally different needs of nitrogen. And we know at minimum our bacteria will free up 20 units in a certain area that's got certain organic nitrogen levels. And we know in other areas it's going to free up to 60 or 70. The point is knowing, okay? Knowing what you need. And that is the Agronomy 365 Jason Schley's baseline program. Okay, Jason's program, what does it do, right? He's using a Haney extract. And he's been doing it forever. And he ties your standard ppm to it. The Haney side of it adds 60 new things to look at in the soil. Okay, so with that, it's not about one nutrient. It's not about one nutrient. If you're a guy that doesn't grid sample and all you do is a removal rate of P and K, I can tell you with 100% certainty, with the combination of the biodyne bacteria, you can replace all your P and half your K. I can tell you that wholeheartedly. But knowing how much you need in the plant is really the right answer. And so after working with 365 and understanding this, I understood that there's a relationship to nutrients. It's not about one nutrient. If I drive my P so friggin' high, it's tied to zinc. There's a ratio there. My P to sulfur, my mag to K, my K to manganese, my boron to calcium, my calcium to potash, my calcium to magnesium, my manganese to iron, my nitrogen to potash. There's ratios. Every nutrition salesman, I call them snake oil guys that come out here and tell stories that say, you need your plant balanced. Great, I'm sick of freaking hearing it. Tell me what it means. Tell me what the numbers are. Okay, and that's what Schley's program can show you. It can show you what the numbers are. Personally, in Northwest Iowa, potash is something that ties up. Go out to Nebraska, and it's a whole different deal. And I got so infatuated, right, with this potash situation. I figured out how to Y drop, and I figured out biologicals. And I got my potash so freaking high in my plant. And I showed Jason, hey, look what I did. He goes, yes, good job, Grasshopper. But you just screwed up your whole plant because it's about a balance. And so that's the real story. And so what BW Fusion can do is tell you how how to qualify. Well, what 365 can do is show you how to qualify and quantify anything you do. Okay? Biologicals, it'll qualify and quantify it. What we found after incorporating this, I told Gil with Biodyne, I said, you know what, Gil, if your bacteria shows negative, Fusion ain't selling it no more, because before, up to this point, before we had it, all I had to measure with was yield, right? And then 75% of the time gave me yield, the other 25 didn't give me nothing. I'm sitting there going, why didn't I get the yield on the 25% of the time? Well, we figured it out, right? Because we now have a new way to test it. And we figured out with one of his strains of his teams of bacteria, it's awesome. It rips out pee. You know, you take your ppm test, they take your soil, they wash it out with acid, and they've got this pee solution. Okay, so what we know is one of the bacteria teams, it cuts that calcium to pee tie-up, and it keeps cutting that stuff that's there, and it adds to that ppm soluble pool. And so, but in that, it also frees up nitrogen. Okay, but in doing that, it consumes carbon. Holy cow, we learned about WEOC and carbon with our 365 program and what that means. And we actually have a product that is awesome at freeing up P and nitrogen, but if you put it on the wrong soil without enough carbon at the wrong time, you can have zero gain and go negative. Okay? We learned that the other 20 some strains from Biodyne's product is that it sequesters carbon and frees it up. And in fact, if you do it at the right ratio, it outcompetes it, the other strains for carbon. We learned that even if beans, if you want to even talk about 70 or 80 bushel, you got to take WEOC divided by CEC. It has to be a certain number. And so the true answer to this market is, this biological market is, because I'm a farmer too and I get frustrated, tell me how to qualify and quantify it. Tell me what the rest of the story is. Okay? And so now with this effort of knowing what this biology will do, okay, what doesn't it do? And knowing that in the situations I'm limiting now on that zinc to P ratio, I'm limited now on that K to S ratio. And knowing that, Fusion went on this journey of, okay, zinc is important. What kind of zinc? When? What application? Corn beans is different. So we start looking at the commodity market. Zinc 9 EDTA, it's been out here forever. We take it and apply it at a quart in the furrow. I can tell you it got us a little blip in the radar. I'm going, well, that stuff don't work. Okay, so we tried to find products on the market that would work and just kept running into brick walls going, all right, I guess we got to freaking innovate it and invent it. And so that's BioZinc today. All right, chelated and manufactured with different things in EDTA, so it doesn't tie up in the soil still, but is freed up 5-to-1 in the plant. But knowing what rate to put on so you don't throw your plant out of balance is the key.
Grant, we may have to take a pause.
And I'm done. So the point, so I'm sitting with you guys out there going, great, I love biologicals because I love the idea, but tell me how to freaking use it, and tell me how to not use it, and tell me what the rate is, and tell me what the rest of the story. And if you can understand that, that's the key to limiting how much nitrogen you need, limiting how much P and K you need, and knowing that this farm, the max nitrogen you might need is only 0.5 pound per bushel, and this farm, you might need 1 pound per bushel. And knowing that is the key to figuring this thing out and putting the controls back in your hands, and it's not in the hands of some global supply BS or some monopolized market.
Yeah, we had that same conversation at dinner last night with a few farmers. Just having better, like Grant's saying, just better information on how to use it, how to apply it, where to apply, when to apply. And I think that's going to be critically important. As all of you know, for full disclosure, I'm on the board of advisors with Meristem. I loved Mitch's story when he left Winfield. I knew Mitch was going to hit a home run with Meristem, and him and Rob, and they've done great. You guys know I have shares as an early investor in Organics. Brian's going to talk next, and who in the hell can't have Mitch in their foxhole? I mean, my gosh. I mean, the guy's got fire and passion. So, I mean, I love all three of you guys, and I know you're in a similar space, and they're all friends, and we might duke it out a little here and there, but you guys are all trying to push the same cause. And I think they're onto something. When I seen it a few years back, I'm thinking the same thing, Mitch, and you guys are all talking about. So I think the microbials are here to stay. I think there's going to be some that fall off. That people are just going to find that maybe are a little more, I guess, bark than bite, so to speak. They may be a little more show than go. And I think there's others that are really going to have some traction. So at Organics this year, I know we've seen some really big growth, and I thought some of the plays with the marketing and the business side have been good, and I thought it could help give you folks that have ag retail operations or other things some insight into how we're trying to grow it as well. So, Brian, give us a little insight into what's happening. I don't, Grant took care of and hammered home the science side.
Yeah, well, love Grant. Thanks, man. Again, I would say that we've come at this in a completely different way. The guys obviously have been talking about microbes, and I would say every single conversation I've spent the last year, mainly in Iowa, sitting in front of a couple hundred farmers, usually just one-on-one, sometime in small groups, and we have a chat about microbes, because that's all we do. Is we have one product, we do one thing, and it's just confusing. And love you, Grant, but you didn't make it any less confusing. So, I mean, if you think you're smarter than nature, then you can take your pharmacy lesson and you can go and try to figure all this stuff out. I got to be honest, that is not what we do at all. We have a completely different product than anything that's ever been on the market. And really our whole goal was, how do you take nature and put it back in your dirt? I think we all can look at ourselves, and I haven't had a single farmer push back on me on this, is that we know how we farm today hurts our soil. Whether it's your tillage practices, whether it's your fungicides or herbicides or pesticides, like, we know we are hurting our soil. And what can we possibly do to make it better? So our conversation is about soil. It's not about all the other things. It's like, if you have good soil, you're going to have a better crop. And a better crop ultimately will net you a better result. So if we've been damaging our soil, we know it. And we certainly know about cover crops. We know about no-till. We know about strip-till. All of those are awesome. And absolutely, we're huge supporters of that. But it's tough. And at least in Iowa, I think the number is about 3% of farmers are no-till. Right? It's just not there yet. People haven't figured out how to crack the code on it. So when we show up, first of all, everybody thinks we sell snake oil. Like, it's just, like, you guys have been sold so much stuff by so many people. And I've heard you all say, right, if everything that I was sold worked, I'd have 500 bushel corn, because everything adds 5 bushel. Like, it just adds 5 bushel. And so we sit down, and so for the first half hour, I get told why they're not going to buy anything, because I've already been sold it, and I don't want to hear about it, and I understand that. But then we really get into the conversation, right? It's like, where's your best dirt? Well, it's on your fence row, right? It's your CRP. It's the stuff where nature's had a chance to go back to nature and then just do its job. And I'm not questioning a single thing that Grant said about all the science. I'm not that smart. And honestly, I don't think anybody's as smart as nature is. And so our approach is completely different. Everything that those guys have talked about is bacteria. Bacteria is a set of the bugs in your ground. It's one piece of the puzzle. We have 400 different bacteria in our product, but we also have 200 fungi. We have 70 protozoa. If you think about nature and how nature works, and just how, like, just as an example, nitrogen turnover. You've got, in a healthy environment, and this is where, again, I think one thing that didn't really come up, and we were driving home the message earlier about less NPK, and I certainly think that's a fair statement to make. And there's no question healthier dirt delivers inputs more effectively to your plant, and that does take life. But if you just look at one example, which I think resonates with farmers when they start trying to think about what is really happening here, if you've got the right amount and you haven't over-fertilized, because the dynamic here is nature is also smart, that if you over-fertilize and you're that guy who puts down 220 pounds of nitrogen to get 200 bushel corn, you're not going to feed your biology, because the plant's not going to waste its energy feeding the biology because it's already overfed. You spilled all the candy in the lobby, right? So if you have the right amount, your bacteria should outcompete your plant for your inputs. And that's awesome. They're not available at that moment to your plant, but they're in the root zone because that's where the bugs want to live. They're going to live in the root zone. But you need to have nature to unlock those things, all right? So what's actually happening? What these guys are counting on is that you have a full range of bugs already in your soil. That may or may not be true, right? But if you look at the carbon makeup of bacteria, right, it's about 5 to 1, right? So 1 nitrogen to 5 carbons. So they're nitrogen hogs. They're going to consume all that nitrogen. Then you turn around, but the natural predators are fungi, which are up the food chain. They're 15 to 1. So when they eat bacteria, they got to get rid of 2/3 of that nitrogen. And they happen to get rid of it right in the root zone in a format the plant wants. And then you go up to protozoa. They're 30 to 1. So they eat fungi, they eat bacteria, they release it. So nature takes over and does a nice job of actually doing what it needs to do. Healthy soil also takes care of insect pressure. It opens up your soil so you have better moisture. You have drought resistance. You've got a healthier plant. You have higher bricks, so you're not going to see. I mean, just again, I don't need to preach about it. The reality is if we had healthy dirt, you're going to have a more efficient farm. Our product is 800 species of microbes. They're alive. We ferment them, right? If you can buy a microbe in a jug on a shelf, it's not alive. It's a spore. It'll come back to life when you put it down, but it's not alive. And you can't take the majority of our species, and there's only like 26 bacteria. I'm not sure exactly. I'm not the science guy here, but there's a small number that actually can be spore form. To actually have living, breathing microbes, they need to be alive. They need to be fed. And so we sell this stuff by the tote. It's got 800 species in it. It's got the food. We have to refrigerate it. If you're not refrigerating your microbes, then they're probably not alive. And so we make this stuff, we refrigerate it. It sits at 37 degrees, and that allows it to sit in suspension so that it's not consuming the food. So then when I drop it off at your farm, you still got 6 or 8 weeks to use it because it's got enough food in there. It's going to die eventually because it's going to either run out of oxygen or it's going to run out of food. And you'll know when it dies because it smells like swamp. Because swamp smells like swamp because all of the living stuff in your soil died because it needs oxygen to live. So our message, again, is simple, right? Is if you take a new look at your land as the asset that it actually is, right? I've also never met a farmer who didn't think somebody else had better dirt, right? Like you could all farm better if you just had, that dirt in northern Iowa that's so nice and black, right? So, but if you take a guy who can do 270 bushel corn in Iowa and move him, to northern Missouri, he's not going to do 270 bushel, corn. It's just not going to happen. But what if we could take that 170 bushel land and make it into 200? The only way you're going to do that efficiently and effectively is to rebuild it. And we've got to regenerate our soil. And there's ways of doing it. You can absolutely do cover crops. You can do no-till. And that over time, that biology will start to build. We have a product that you put down at planting, and you'll know within 5 days. You'll see it. You'll know a month later because you'll feel it in your soil. You get a spade out, you can see it's opening up. You'll see it at harvest. So the beauty is in that first year, you're going to get an ROI for having chosen to invest in your soil. So ours is $20 an acre, right? So for $20, you make that one-time baby stuff, and at the end, I'm confident you're going to know you got value for your money. And the reason I say that is 90% of the people that have ever bought our product bought it again and bought it again. You guys don't waste money. If it doesn't work, you don't keep buying it. 90% of the people that buy our product keep buying it. And the other thing is, I said in this conversation, I've only got a few minutes, so I can't give you the whole spiel, but if I had you for an hour over the last year, 90% of you buy when I tell you the whole story. Every time. And I've sent it in front of 200 farmers, and 90% of them bought product because it actually makes sense. We all know we need better dirt, and the way you do is put the life back into it. And our product is the only one in the world that we're aware of that is truly broad-based biology. Everything else is bacteria only, and that's great. Bacteria absolutely do the things that Grant said they do. They do important things, but they don't do everything, right? What we want to do is to give nature back its tools and then let nature take over. Because what nature will do with that full biome is it will balance itself. It will figure out, the plant will feed what it needs, and those bugs will grow, and it'll be healthy. And so that's what we're about. So I think, Kevin, what we're most passionate about is everybody taking serious the journey that we all need to take to rebuild our topsoil. That's what we're really about. When you do that, you're going to have success as a farmer. You're going to need less inputs. You're going to have healthier crops. You're going to have more stress resistance. It just all works better. So Kevin asked me to come up with a strategy for this. You would have seen in the email, we have a breakfast tomorrow morning. I apologize for those that didn't sign up. We started at 80. We bumped it to 160. We've sold out, so I'm looking forward to seeing a bunch of you guys in the morning. But the rest of you can't be there because there's no room. But in that breakfast, and now we're going to offer it up for everybody here, for the first 500 acres that you'd want to actually try to help rebuild your soil, we're going to give you $2,000 off the cost of doing that. So it takes it down to $16 an acre. And if you start this journey, the thing I want everybody to think about, is it is a journey, right? You'll get a return the very first time you put this stuff down and you'll like it. But imagine 5 years from today what your soil could be if every spring and every fall you put down product and you're rebuilding that biome and you're getting your activity level right and you're getting all those healthy bugs back in there. You're going to have a different farm. That 170 bushel land will now be 200, and that's what you can give your kids, right? Can we give our kids a better farm than we have? That's what the goal is, right? So if you look at that 5-year journey, what would you pay to have a better farm per acre? With our product, that's less than $200 over 5 years to rebuild your soil.
Let's take a break and open it up to some quick questions before we go to break. I should say a couple of questions. And one sales tip I was taught a long time ago. Yeah, there's a question out there. Because all of them are in the competitive space, and you guys have other businesses that you do sales in. And I tell my kids, I never put down another competitor's product. When I went and talked to someone, I wouldn't put down their choice, because you're basically insulting the person and the decision they made with that choice. So I always was respectful, and that's the way I feel about our people we have up here today in the space. I think they all have good quality attributes. I don't like them to sell over one another or try to sell over one another. I know they're all competitive, but I think, some of us are going to like some things and some of us are going to like some other things. So I think it's all great. And I think it's all in good spirit. So anyone have questions? Do you have one out here? Yeah. You might have to yell it.
I'd love to answer that or give a go at it. Number one is lime is your first dollar spent on a farm if you need your pH raised to a 6.2 to a 6.7. It's your first dollar spent along with tile. So we champion that all day long. And part of what we do with the 365 is show how pH ties into that whole situation. You mentioned calcium to magnesium. That's one of 12 soil nutrient relationships. So there's again, N to K, N to S, zinc to P, P to S, K to mag, K to manganese, boron to calcium, calcium to K, calcium to mag, like you just said, and manganese to iron are all key nutrient relationships. And when you can get those in the right ratio and the right relationship, again, what 365 will do is it actually calculates, it calls NBI, Nutrient Balance Index. And if that's perfectly in unison, all those relationships together at the same time, you get a 0 on your score of NBI. And every time, if you have 5 of these things laid down, you can pick the lowest NBI score, and we can pick that farm's going to yield the highest. Okay, so flash in the pan, come buy, come sell. We need science and facts and proof to know what we're doing, and that's what we believe that we're bringing to the table is the rest of the story. How you handle NPK, sulfur, how that ties into manganese, copper, calcium, iron, manganese, boron, how biology and pH, how it's all one system. We actually have the numbers to know what that means. And so one system means it's one budget. Every farmer should be the same budget and address all those things. So I guess from our standpoint, with what we're doing, we lead with education, then we lead with how do we have something that can help you? Manage the expectation, and if we can't help you, we'll tell you. And so the data and the information is where we all have to start. And to my opinion, Agronomy 365 with Jason Schley and Next Level Ag Lab is the only company I've seen that's got it figured out, that's unbiased, that's put it out there and did it for the right reasons, isn't owned by Big Ag, and isn't influenced by outsider venture capital or money from, people, stockholders. And again, our company, myself, don't have that either. So we can wake up every day and say, how are we going to grow? We have to talk to you next year. We have to sell you year 3 and year 4 and year 5. We have to talk to you. It's not get new customers. If we want this thing to grow and be what it's going to be for the next 200 years, we have to continue to talk to you every year. And that's what we feel is important.
Hey, Mitch, tell them when you and I first got together, when you were executive at Winfield, what keeps products out of the farm gate? And a little about, you know what I'm saying, how some of the bigger ag companies,
Well, it kind of goes back to the example of we don't need corn for ethanol anymore. You don't need corn for ethanol anymore. The price of corn is going to go to $2.50, and 75% of you in this room are going to go away. The same applies to the channel. If you take the margins out of chemicals and fertilizer, guess who's going to go away? So asking you to go away from selling corn to ethanol producers is like asking Big Ag to quit selling fertilizer and chemicals. It ain't going to happen. I can tell you, I've been in this industry a long time, but when this stuff all started happening in the 90s, I happened to be managing a product called Lorsban for a company called Dow AgroSciences. My world woke up and went to bed every day with chlorpyrifos on my mind. It was the only thing I cared about in this world. And then some turkeys went out and come up with neonic insecticides and corn rootworm corn. You know what happened to Lorsban? Can't buy it anymore, can you? I did everything I could to keep corn rootworm. I told lies. I went out. I did anything I could to keep that technology out of the market because I knew when it got in the market, I was done. So don't look for the channel to bring you the newest innovation. It's like asking Ferrari to bring you the new electric car. It ain't going to happen. You've got to find this innovation through channels that are not punished by supporting it. Does that make sense?
Comes down to capitalism, supply and demand, and the more you guys ask for it and challenge your supplier, if they want to be in business, they're going to be forced to figure it out.
In 24, next year, Maristem will launch a talc graphite-based product that'll give you all your inoculants. They'll all be alive because they ain't going to die before they get to the field. You're going to get corn rootworm control, and it's not going to be from a chemical. It's going to be from a microbe that causes the corn rootworm to get confused. It can't find the root, and it dies. The microbe don't kill the corn rootworm. But what it does is it sends off a signal that them rootworms, they don't have eyes. They can't find the roots. And if they don't find a root, they starve to death. We'll also launch a product with full disease control. It's an EPA-approved fungicide biological. Well, let me tell you, when it says EPA-approved, you can't lie about it. It's for real. We'll launch a fungicide next year that is a pure microbial. In soybeans, it kills every every disease underground except Pythium. That's a pretty big one, right? So what we'll do is we'll just mix it with metalaxyl in a separate compartment that you'll deliver to the farm. Now, through your talc graphite, you'll deliver your inoculant, your metalaxyl, your fungicide, and your biostimulant. How many liquid seed treaters do you think are going to get on board with that? Not one. How many seed companies making $100 a bag off corn rootworm are going to get on board with that? Nobody's going to get on board with it. Grant's exactly right. The only way we're going to get it on board is if we go out and we work with you individually, because the folks making money on these segments today, they're not going to go away and roll over. They're going to be like me trying to protect Lore's band. So I think, Kevin, that's kind of what you was looking for there.
No, yeah, I agree. It's tough to get a lot of things through the farm gate, and we're seeing that more and more as technology continues to, come on more rapidly.
You think about it, the industry starts with about a half dozen points that everything filters through. So if those half dozen points don't take innovation to market, you don't get it.
Yeah.
Meristem was formed to make sure you got the innovation. And the reason we go to market through a different channel than anybody else is so we can deliver it. Because if you go to somebody and ask them to take a cut and pay, they're probably, if they're a capitalist, they're going to tell you to go pound sand. Well, a lot of our products ask the channel to take a cut and pay. So we have to have a different way to get to your farm.
Yeah, I would agree, and the problem with anything go-to-market strategy is the funnel, right? And so in innovation, they go, what is the funnel? And okay, that's third-party distribution is the funnel. What is third-party distribution? Why were they created? If you take a look at BSF or any branded chemical with the EPA registration, they wanted assets and trucks, tanks, warehouses, and trucks, okay? Because they couldn't do it on their own, and that's smart, okay? But in the nutritional space, which is a dangerous word because I think NPK, sulfur, and all that's one bucket. We could come up with a new name for it. You're right. That's today being handled primarily by third-party distribution that's trying to train and educate you. Okay, I can tell you from a retail standpoint, Wells Ag is a retailer, right, as well. And so we buy our branded chemicals. We have to buy them through third-party distribution. Because we have PW Fusion and we don't need to buy that from third-party distribution, we are our own third-party distribution. They've challenged me and go, well, I don't think we want to sell you anymore your Veltima because you're not buying our nutritional.
That's
okay?
the loyalty
and
kickback that they're all.
Well,
I'm surprised we got through this morning without loyalty programs.
There needs to be regulation. Unfortunately, I hate regulation, but there needs to be regulation, just like the EPA in this whole crop nutritional space, and it's coming because I agree that we will be farming with specifically identified and proven what they do, bacterias. We're going to be using them to farm in the next 10 years. This is the new frontier. Mark my words. We're in it right now, and everybody's jostling for position. A little regulation will go a long ways at identifying what they do, but knowing what harm they do, right? And knowing that and the negatives is also going to be key to this thing long term.
We're going to have to take a break to be on time, but I'm going to tell you, appreciate everyone on the panel. Talk to them. They'll be around. The next speaker, Paul Mobley, I was told about 10 or 12 years ago, I had to see this guy. I traveled around and spoke all over the country, and I never got a chance to see him. And I told Jordan, I said, man, I've tried to find this guy, and I've never seen him on any of the places I've gone to speak or any of my travels. So I said, hell, we're just going to have him in here. And so we're having him in, and I've talked to other people in the room who've also been told similar things. I've never seen him speak. I'm super excited to hear his story, so I encourage everyone. This is the one you probably you want to hear when you come back, so it should be a good one. So I appreciate it. Take 15 minutes. We'll come back in. Thanks.